Michael Cohen, not that Michael Cohen, but he wrote a piece the other day that said, indeed, there's no better example of former Donald Trump's hold over the modern GOP than this week's near total erasure of the Republican Party's past. And Michael points out that if you're watching, which I cannot because I go berserk, if you're watching all or part of this Republican convention, you might not be aware of it. But the Republican Party is, in fact, 170 years old. It was formed in 1854 as an abolitionist movement opposed to the expansion of slavery into the Western territories. And the first standard bearer, of course, we all know this now, or we should, was Abraham Lincoln, which is why this Christian fascist corpse that has devoured, completely eaten the Republican Party sometimes refers to himself as the Party of Lincoln. Right. But if you do have the stomach, and I mean that literally, to watch what is going on in Milwaukee this week, you're likely to hear about only one of the 19 presidents who have been Republicans since this republic was established. Trump. This is what the Christian fascists, this is what the maggots did. They wiped the Republican slate clean and made the year 2016 the year zero. What Republican luminaries from the past have you heard, if you watch this filthy shit, have you heard mentioned, even mentioned? Not just at the Republican National Convention that's going on right now, but any time during these son of a bitches, except maybe when they talk, except maybe a passing reference like John Kasich every once in a while. Don't get me started on him. References Reagan and who else? Eisenhower. And the chances of hearing any Republican president of the past is zero. George W. Bush. He's one of only 4 Republican presidents in history to win 2 presidential elections and serve 8 years in office. Did you know that? Only 4. Nixon? I don't think Nixon served his entire 2 years. But Eisenhower? George W. Bush? I don't know who the other ones are. I really don't give a shit. But the chance of hearing George Bush's name mentioned in a positive light in Milwaukee this week is close to absolute zero. And 20 years ago, ask Nicole Wallace on MSNBC. 20 years ago, George W. Bush was a revered figure within the Republican Party. But, as Michael Cohen points out, in the 16 years since he left office, Bush's presidency has largely been stuffed down Winston Smith's memory hole. And that has been a bipartisan effort. Even Democrats don't bother talking about his disaster, his presidency anymore. Look what he handed off to Barack Obama. Think back to 2008. Do you remember what was going on? The crushing debt thanks to a massive tax cut that George W. Bush made after he got the presidency from Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton, who had, 3 years in a row of budget surpluses. And what was that used to accomplish when George W. Bush took office? To work on our infrastructure? To pay down the national debt? No. To give the wealthy a tax cut. Exactly what the orange Jesus fucking Donald Trump did when he got the office in 2016. But Bush left office with an historically low approval rating and a cratering economy. It was a disastrous presidency. He was directly responsible, and he took credit for it, for invading Iraq and killing 1 million fucking people. He tried to kill my dad. Remember that? He tried to kill my dad, Saddam Hussein. He tried to kill my dad. But you won't hear anything about him this week in Milwaukee, will you? But that's not the reason, necessarily, why he's not going to be mentioned at the party circle jerk in Milwaukee, a party he once led. They still think they're Republicans. And the reason for it is fairly simple. Bush was an internationalist, like so many Republicans were. Trump is an isolationist. Trump is a America firster. Trump is, well. And Bush, for all of his filthy faults, and he had an endless supply. He's a fucking liar, a coward. His whole family were thieves. But he was pro-immigration. And at least in public, he opposed the demonizing of people of color. Trump, of course, is the exact opposite. Trump's going to get the Jews. Trump's going to get the coloreds. Trump's going to get the immigrants. Does this sound familiar? It should. And Bush, of course, was part of a multi-generational political dynasty. And so to put it bluntly, for these MAGA Nazis, these Trump filth, George W. Bush is the very embodiment of the dreaded political establishment. They don't want a political establishment unless its name is Jesus Trump Christ. That they'll accept. But it's not just Bush who's been kicked to the curb by these Nazis. There are also 3 living Republican vice presidents who don't even exist. Dan Quayle, Dick Cheney, Mike Pence. Cheney, forget Dick Cheney, that filthy fucking murderer who just the 2 words together, Dick Cheney, and I start to get gut spasms. But Cheney's the father of Liz Cheney. And Liz Cheney is Donald Trump's white whale. He despises her because she was a co-chair of that January 6th committee. And on January 6th, Trump helped whip up a mob that wanted to kill Mike Pence. So Pence is not going to be there either. And certainly not Dan Quayle, as useless as that guy was. But it was Quayle who told Mike Pence, and they're both from Indiana, he told Mike Pence that Pence, did not have the authority to stop Congress from certifying the 2020 election. So those 3 vice presidents, fuck them, down the memory hole. They don't exist. They never did exist. There's only Trump. What about the Republican presidential nominee from 2012? You remember who it was? I have to think. Mitt Romney, Mittens. He's getting out of the Senate because of his, he says, revulsion at the direction the party has taken since 2016. And of course, Trump hates him too, because Romney was the only Republican who voted to convict this filthy Nazi fuck Donald Trump at both of Trump's impeachment trials. And the only Republican senator to vote that way. Not the sainted Susan Collins. Well, I don't think we should convict him because he learned his lesson. That was after the first impeachment. And Paul Ryan, You remember Paul Ryan? You remember him as Speaker of the House? You also remember he was George Romney. He was also Mitt Romney's running mate in 2012. Paul Ryan. He might be at the convention in Milwaukee because, after all, he's from Wisconsin, but he's not going to be given a speaking position. Same goes for Sarah Palin. She ran with John McCain, but there won't be any tributes for John McCain. Remember when the Republican Party conventions pay homage to a number of their former leaders, presidents, vice presidents? That is gone in the age of Trump. It's gone. Remember what Orwell said. And that is what is occurring. These Nazi son of a bitches are pushing every single name in the Republican pantheon of ghosts and demons and a few righteous people right down the memory hole. There is only Donald Trump. Only Trump. Remember when Trump mocked McCain's time as a prisoner of war in Vietnam? Of course you do. And the National Convention where a McCain is likely to show up will probably be at the Democratic National Convention because Cindy, McCain's widow, spoke there in 2020. There are going to be a number of people who think they're still Republicans who are going to address the Democratic Convention. Watch. You'll see. Bob Dole, the 1996 presidential nominee and vice presidential nominee 20 years earlier, he died in 2021. What do you think the chances are that there will be a tribute to him at this year's Nazi rally in Milwaukee? There wasn't one in 2020 to honor George Herbert Walker Bush, who died in 2018. And you think there's even going to be a reference to Ronald Reagan? Huh? And Reagan was the revered figure that Republicans tied themselves to for decades after he left office. But not anymore. There is only Donald Jesus Christ Trump. In Donald Jesus Christ Trump's Christian fascist party that used to be the Republican Party, there is no legacy, no coherent ideological beliefs, they don't exist, and zero enduring political tradition. As Michael Cohen wrote, there is no past, no present, no future. There's just Trump. Trump. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.